Sam was one of the most creative producers, I think, that we've ever seen.
Sam Spiegel has to have been one of the greatest contributors to the film industry in its history.
Sam Spiegel was the carrier of a tradition that has nearly been exterminated.
Sam Spiegel was, I think, a really great producer.
The Spiegel is probably the last great filmmaker of yesteryear.
Sam Spiegel was a very talented monster.
He was an angel and a devil, and I loved him. But maybe I loved him like you love a tiger.
Who is Sam Spiegel? I mean, Sam Spiegel is an immigrant. He is a refugee. He's a guy who comes from nothing. He winds up being a major Hollywood producer.
Sam Spiegel était secret et énigmatique. Il s'est réinventé 1000 fois, tout en faisant constamment évoluer le scénario de sa propre vie. Pour lui, seul le courage et la détermination pouvaient vaincre l'adversité. Cette croyance se retrouve non seulement dans les films qu'il a produits, mais aussi dans son parcours personnel, qui a fait de lui l'un des producteurs les plus mythiques d'Hollywood, à l'égal d'un Zanuck, d'un Selznick, d'un Goldwyn ou d'un Meyer. Mais qui était Sam Spiegel?
He was Jewish, and he came out, of course, of the Hitler fascist era. And he, above all, was horrified by the Holocaust, of course.
If you're a Polish Jew or a Russian Jew, it helps to understand Sam Spiegel. The desperation, the drive, the intellectualism, the emphasis on smarts. I mean, that was all there.
He had a huge inferiority complex from his family because he was the black sheep, and his brother, who was a professor and knew a lot of languages, everyone was so proud of him. And Sam, too. He was always very humble around his brother.
He fled Europe in 1933.
He was in the barber's shop one day, and he was tapped on the shoulder, and the barber leant forward and whispered in his ear, "Get out, you're on a list." And he picked up his things as he left the barber's shop, and he walked out and didn't even go home. He just got out of the country straight away with absolutely nothing.
Rebelle dès son plus jeune âge, Sam se coupe de sa famille et de ses racines. Il s'engage pour la cause juive et part en Palestine comme jeune pionnier, à la recherche d'une nouvelle patrie. Il se marie et tente cette nouvelle vie. Mais les conditions de vie difficiles ont un impact négatif sur sa santé. Il divorce, coupe les ponts avec sa nouvelle famille et rentre en Europe.
Au début des années 1920, Sam Spiegel fait beaucoup d'allers-retours entre Vienne et la Palestine. Il a beaucoup de contacts à Vienne et tout se passe à peu près bien quand il est à Vienne. Mais après 1927, il vient s'établir à Berlin. Mais il n'a pas de maison, il n'a pas de domicile et il se rend compte que s'il va dans un hôtel bon marché, s'il ne paye pas sa note, il va se faire taper. Et il peut se retrouver un jour avec les genoux brisés ou la tête explosée dans la rue. Et il comprend que dans les grands hôtels, les gens n'aiment pas le scandale. Donc, si lui amène de la publicité à l'hôtel avec des actrices, avec des auteurs, avec des politiciens, organise des fêtes, il trouvera toujours quelqu'un, un milliardaire, un industriel ou un riche collègue qui va payer l'addition. Donc, il va utiliser ça pendant des années à Berlin, à Paris, mais à Londres et à Los Angeles, ça ne marchait plus du tout. Donc il a eu beaucoup de problèmes à cause de ça.
Sam got deported because he had been passing bad checks. And so he got arrested. He went before a judge in London. He was given 3 months in prison and deportation back to France.
He had a refugee mentality for sure. He probably didn't trust anyone. The assumption being some quasi-paranoid, but justifiably so.
In 1939, Sam comes in from Mexico illegally into the United States. And he uses the name now S.P. Eagle. This is because he didn't want to use Spiegel because he had a record.
S.P. Eagle, c'est évidemment un jeu de mots. C'est l'aigle, le symbole de l'Amérique. Mais c'est aussi un nom qui est dans la lignée de tous ces changements de nom que beaucoup d'artistes non anglo-saxons, non protestants anglais prenaient pour se créer une nouvelle identité. C'est-à-dire qu'il y avait Shelley Winters, Kirk Douglas, John Garfield, Edward G. Robinson, tous ces gens qui avaient des noms à consonance germanique ou sémitique ont changé de nom pour pouvoir s'intégrer dans le milieu hollywoodien.
The great names of Hollywood were all European Jews who realized that they could not any longer have a life in Europe. It was Europe's loss, remains Europe's loss, and is our gain.
Si Destin, sorti en 1942, est le premier film américain de Sam Spiegel. C'est aussitôt un succès critique et commercial.
Après le succès de sa première production américaine, Si Destin, Tales of Manhattan de Julien Duvivier, Spiegel peut enfin s'acheter une maison. C'est la première fois, depuis qu'il a quitté la Palestine en 1927, qu'il n'est pas sans domicile fixe. Là, il est chez lui. Et il va pouvoir développer des projets. Et le premier gros projet qu'il développe, c'est The Stranger, d'Orson Welles.
Sam est confronté à des superstars compliqués avec lesquels il apprend à composer. Cet apprentissage est essentiel pour le producteur, dont la carrière décolle et connaît ses premiers succès.
Yes, your little man. You killed him? With these hands. The same hands that have held you close to me.
Sam Spiegel at the time was in London, and because he spoke so many different languages, he was doing a lot of translating, he was working, he had his fingers in the movie business in a lot of different ways, and writing himself, trying to come up with some story ideas. And he met John Huston, and he was sort of down and out. And Sam wasn't that much better, but he would take him for lunch or for dinner on the company's dime that Sam was working for. And so that's how they first get to know each other. They didn't know each other long, but every once in a while he saw him. And John at the time realized that, Sam was the kind of guy who went to jail a few times, but it was always because of finances. He didn't pay his debts, and he was kind of a rogue. John always was a rogue, so you could see where they could like each other. The studios were breaking up. And so you had this period of time where independent production companies were just getting started. So Sam and John formed the company, Horizon. They wanted to do The African Queen, but Warner Brothers owned the property. So they went to see Warner Brothers and said, look, we'd like to buy this property. And they said, well, we'll give it to you for $50,000. So Sam got the bright idea to go to this company, Sound Services, and he said to them, look, we'll use your equipment and we'll give you credit if you put up the $50,000, for this. And to his surprise and everyone else's, they did.
She was an extraordinary wheeler, dealer and packager. Sam was a master at putting together and raising money for films. He went into cooperation with John Wolfe, and he put together a package, not really much different from the first Star Wars packages. He paid people off in percentages and future profits on things like that, as they did on Star Wars.
L'action se déroule en Afrique, au début de la Première Guerre mondiale. Une vieille fille bigote tombe amoureuse du propriétaire débraillé de l'African Queen, un bateau délabré. Ensemble, ils vont affronter les Allemands.
Once they owned the book, they say who would play Charlie Allnut, the down-and-out character, and who's going to play the spinster woman, Rosie. Humphrey Bogart is considered, and John knows Bogart from Maltese Falcon, from Treasure of Sierra Madre, from Key Largo, so it's a natural. And what about Katharine Hepburn? She is that kind of prim and proper lady. Wouldn't that be interesting? So they start approaching them, and they go to Bogey. He says, "Yeah, I'll listen. If Hepburn's interested, that should be good." They go to Hepburn. Hepburn sees, she can't really trust Sam. She could see it right away. And when she finally did agree to it, and she flies, off to London and everything, she had her father wire $10,000 to her account. So in case she never got paid anything, so she always had suspicions about Sam and getting paid. But the adventure, the idea of going to Africa was really a good one for her.
We had a very good crew, and I have to say you can praise Sam for that because he chose a lot of the crew. My first meeting with Mr. Sam Spiegel was quite memorable for me. So I was the youngest script girl in the business, and after about I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, he offered me the job. Except for the ending. We did have a script when we left London. It was, I think, the only time I'd been on a film with John where I was not retyping the script by the minute, shall we say. And I worked with Huston then on a further 13 productions.
African Queen, c'est le film de Spiegel. Quand il a fallu passer de l'Ouganda au Grand Lac, Huston, c'était toujours la chasse à l'éléphant qui l'intéressait. Il ne s'est pas du tout préoccupé du transport des équipes et surtout de la façon dont on amènerait le bateau. Et Spiegel, il était là. Quand ils sont arrivés au bord des Grands Lacs, Spiegel était en short, suant, transpirant, mais Spiegel s'est vraiment occupé de ça. Quand la production a vraiment été en danger physiquement, il était là.
He did whatever they needed. He did get the cameras. He did his job as a producer so they could get this thing shot. There's no doubt about it.
In the case of The African Queen, what an adventure. Only John Huston could have ever done it, with two aging stars, Bogart and Hepburn. Extraordinary movie.
For the first 3 days of shooting, he didn't feel Katharine Hepburn got it right. She was a little too dour, a little too strong. She didn't like Charlie Allnut. And John went to see her and he says, "You're playing the character wrong. Do you remember when Eleanor Roosevelt visited the veterans in the hospital?" She says, "Yes, I've seen that." Just, she was an ugly woman, and she always smiled, and something clicked like that. And John says, "Just think about it," and he walked out. Katharine Hepburn said it was the best piece of direction she has ever received in her life.
All right, miss, have it your own way, but don't blame me for what happened.
Very well, then, let's get started.
What, now, miss?
Yes, now.
There was a scene where she's pumping some water from the ship, and John had her do this, and she's supposed to be really thinking of Bogey, so it's kind of a sexual thing that she's doing with the handle. But she didn't realize that. John did. And John says, "Keep pumping, keep pumping." And John never calls cut. And she just thought that was not funny. She didn't appreciate John's sense of humor. The thing about The African Queen in the movie was you could not go in the water. The water, you could get worms, you could get all sorts of infections. It was just not a safe thing. So any scenes that involve water, where they're in the water, was not shot in Africa. That was all shot at the studios outside of London. The scenes where Bogart goes in to pull out the African Queen, and he's got the cap on and he's pulling like this, he's this high in water. When he comes out of it, he's got leeches on his body. He shudders, and Bogart really didn't want to do this scene because he was really afraid of leeches. He said, "You're not putting any of those on my body." John, of course, said, "Of course we're going to do it." And he told Spiegel, "Sam, I want you to insist that Bogart has to use real leeches or we're not going to pay him."
There were rows. I can remember hearing raised voices in the corridors between Sam Spiegel and John Huston.
Well, Huston was one of the few directors who could stand up to Spiegel. Huston took no nonsense from anyone, and he wouldn't take it even from Spiegel.
Sam wanted one ending, John wanted something else and was making Peter Viertel rewrite it, and he himself was actually rewriting it because John always did rewrite his stuff eventually.
One way to end it is that they get caught and they get hung. And Spiegel really believed that people are going to love these characters, but it's got to have an uplifting ending. And John, at that time, was going with the down ending, because that's what a lot of his films had. He had a sort of cynical view of life. Spiegel knew not to go to John, because they would just get into a big battle. So Spiegel takes Peter Viertel to dinner, and he says, "Listen, you really got to talk to him. You got to change this. It's got to be uplifting." And Viertel got Spiegelized. he said, "Okay," and he went to John and says, "Hey, John, I think we should go this way. You should make it level. They're great characters." And John agreed, and that's how that ending happened.
They did survive. They get married, and then the torpedo goes off in the boat. So I think it was a compromise. I think, strangely enough, that the ending that Sam Spiegel wanted was perhaps, in actual fact, a better one.
We did it, Charlie!
But how? Well, what do you think?
Sam was astute. He knew he had a good movie. He knew it was worth rushing to Hollywood and getting this out. And the reviews were 95% positive. They all just said they never saw anything quite like this. And then no one expected Hepburn. No one expected this. John was hoping that money would start coming in because he still doesn't have any money. He hasn't got paid for this. And so he gets in touch with Bogart and he says, have you been paid yet? And Bogey says, no, I've met with my business manager, Morgan Marie, and he says, we're going to sue you. We're going to sue you. John didn't want to get sued. John wanted his own money. So he goes to Sam and says, I'm out. It's over. And John told me, he said, I can't remember if I paid him $25,000 or he paid me $25,000, but that's what it was. I was out at Horizon Pictures. And when the Oscar time came, John was nominated for screenwriting and for directing. Hepburn was nominated for acting, and Bogey was nominated for acting. So I had 4 nominations, and one of them won. Bogey won.
And African Queen made a lot of money. So obviously, Wolfe got his money back, and everyone who worked on it got their money back.
Sam went on to become a millionaire. The African Queen did enormous business. He made that fortune, and it was all his. John said it was the worst deal or misdeal he ever made.
Spiegel, confiant, abandonne le nom d'emprunt de S.P. Eagle et peut enfin signer ses films de son propre nom.
Spiegel was a guy who loved women in a certain way that wasn't just that he wanted to be with one. He was married 3 times, but he always had 3 women wherever he was going. They were always young.
Sam was, of course, a great luxury party giver, and all the stars would come because they wanted to be in his next movie. But, you know, he was no Harvey Weinstein.
Nobody said, watch out or anything, and I didn't experience anything. Look, he was a much older man. And you know, I suppose in my innocence, I didn't think it was about anything anyway, other than whether I was right for this movie he was making.
It was difficult in those days, but I think, you know, by saying no, strangely enough, perhaps in these days, Sam afterwards had great respect for me and, you know, never, shall we say, propositioned me again.
Malgré le succès commercial de l'Odyssée de l'African Queen, les dépenses somptuaires et les dettes de Sam limitent ses marges de manœuvre financières.
Harry Warner said, who's going to go and see a film about a bum stevedore? Kazan, for all of his success, I mean, he'd already done Streetcar, he was the biggest name in Hollywood, could not get the film funded.
Kazan, who was a well-known director on Broadway and in Hollywood, shopped around and went to see all the producers in Hollywood. Nobody wanted to touch the film.
Kazan testified voluntarily, naming names, before the House Un-American Activities Committee.
One of the problems was that the first script was Arthur Miller's script. Arthur Miller at the time was considered as a neo-communist. And on the other hand, Elia Kazan was considered as a rat. And Bud Schulberg was considered as a rat politically too. And at that time, the docks were run by the mafia. So it was a difficult subject too. The whole thing was very fractious and difficult. And the only producer who wanted to work with Kazan, with Bud Schulberg, was Sam Spiegel, because he didn't care.
He didn't put his politics into his filmmaking.
He was in a hotel, and in the room next to him, the door was open, and for some reason, Elia Kazan and Bud Schulberg are in there, and they're discussing, how are we going to get the money for this film? Nobody wants to do it. It's about a waterfront. People don't want to be with Kazan. And Sam walked in. Let me look at the script, he says. So he goes back to his room. He reads the script. And the next morning, he's in bed, and Bud Schulberg apparently comes in, and Sam is like, you know what? I'm going to do this film, he says. I'll figure out a way to raise it. So he does. He's going to raise the money, and that happens.
He said right away he felt that the subject was good, and he had a very good nose for a good subject.
One of the things that I think was Sam's strength was he had a very good literary sense. He had a good ear. He knew what he wanted.
You wanted my philosophy of life? Do it to him before he does it to you.
Father, who'd want to kill Joey? Who'd want to kill Joey?
Listen, you know who the pistols are. You're going to keep still until they cut you down one by one?
Bud Schulberg felt they had a good script, so did Kazan. And Sam said, no, it's not done. It's not as good as it could be. And he fought them, and they fought all the time. He made rewrite after rewrite after rewrite.
In this sense, Spiegel is presented as, basically a rogue producer. He had a rare literary talent. I mean, he knew what a good script was. And he insisted on good scripts. I mean, other producers would have said, yeah, go, you're the experts. I'm just going to count the money. I'm going to do a deal here. I'm going to do another distribution deal there. Sam's involvement was greater than that.
Il avait un réel talent. C'était un vrai producteur. Il était très créatif. Et surtout, c'était quelqu'un d'extrêmement cultivé. Des gens comme Harry Cohn, comme Louis B. Mayer, étaient complètement incultes. C'était des gens qui savaient faire des affaires, ils savaient gérer un studio, ils savaient faire du business, mais ils étaient nuls pour opérer une bonne histoire ou un bon scénario. Spiegel, c'était un génie, c'est-à-dire qu'il était aussi bon, voire meilleur, que le meilleur d'entre tous, qui était Daryl Zanuck, puisque Daryl Zanuck a laissé passer le scénario de Sur les quais.
I usually spend several months with the writer, 2-3 months with the writer, just discussing the story, discussing the themes, the characters, the situations, the scenes in general, the line of the story, just spending day in, day out, doing nothing but discussing the possibilities of the script.
Spiegel was demanding rewrite after rewrite after rewrite. And the story is, and I asked Bud about this, he said it's true. One night, in the middle of the night, he's in the John, this is on their farm in Pennsylvania, and he's shaving, about to get dressed. And his wife gets up out of bed, she comes in, what are you doing? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, I'm going in to kill Sam Spiegel. I've had it. I'm at the end of my rope.
Sam always interfered with the script. And Sam knew better than you did. You might be the best screenwriter in the world. And Bud Schulberg was an extremely good one.
Bud Schulberg a dit, on avait un bon scénario au départ, mais il en a fait quelque chose de génial parce qu'il a fait supprimer le journaliste. C'est-à-dire que non, il faut que ça soit le Docker lui-même, le personnage de Terry Malloy, qui prenne conscience et qui ait une raison lui-même, pas parce qu'il est poussé par le journaliste. Et ça, c'est une idée de Spiegel, et ça a amélioré considérablement l'impact dramatique du film. C'est ça qui a permis l'identification du public. Et Schulberg n'aimait pas du tout Spiegel, hein. Ils ont passé leur temps à se déchirer, mais Schulberg avait reconnu que Spiegel était un génie pour la construction dramatique et pour le travail du scénario.
The Terry Malloy part, the Brando role, was originally actually given by Spiegel to Frank Sinatra. And Frank was, he was bankable at that point, but it would have been a totally different film. I think the idea for Sinatra actually came from Kazan, because Kazan was not a guy who didn't have his ear to the ground when it came to who was bankable, who, would fly at the box office. Sam, however, like everyone else on the face of this God's green earth, knew about Marlon Brando. I mean, Brando is the hottest actor around. And so even though Frank Sinatra, who was bankable, he, Spiegel, went after Brando nonetheless.
Marlon Brando was very torn about the whole witch hunt that was happening in Hollywood in those days.
The story is that Sam and Marlon met by accident. I don't believe it was an accident. Sam had set it up. At 3 in the morning, 3 a.m., at the Stage Deli on Broadway, and Sam is said to have counseled Marlon. Marlon, this is not about ethics. This is about your work. It's about your career. You should do this role. Spiegel, very, very shrewdly, got Brando, and he dumped Sinatra.
When Brando, who said no for the film the first time, got to know that Sinatra was contacted, he said yes, of course.
He knew how to control writers. He knew what he wanted. He knew how to deal with stars. And that is a lost art.
What makes you so special? Oh,
The conditions of the shoot were very difficult too. It was cold, people didn't want to work, the syndicates were all over the docks, and the parents of Marlon Brando were on the shoot. Marlon Brando wanted to be at his psychiatrist every day. All in all, it was a very difficult shoot. They shot, I think, 35 or 36 days, and Sam Spiegel would come on the shoot, and he would come with his alligator shoes and his beautiful coat and in his Rolls Royce or whatever car he had with his driver. And all these people were freezing cold and trying to shoot a film in a very difficult situation. So seeing this guy very comfortable in his alligator shoes with a big cigar was a little, well, off color. Eva Marie Saint was well acquainted with Brando. She was well acquainted with, of course, Kazan. And I think the relationship with Brando was very good. He was very respectful, and it shows on the screen. She has such freshness and such empathy and such shyness, too, that you feel for her.
Are you training to be a nun?
You recall that wonderful scene with Eva Marie Saint and the glove? She dropped the glove. Brando turned it into a set piece. He picks up the glove, and he put the glove on. This is nowhere in the script.
That's nice. What do you do up there? Just, what, study?
Well, I'd be a teacher.
Teacher? That's very good. You know, personally, I admire brains. My brother Charlie is a very brainy guy. I'm glad you stopped by for me.
The scene in the back of the taxi cab is a little weird because it didn't fit exactly in the film. It was shot not on the docks or in the streets outside like the whole film, like the rest of the film, but it was shot in a studio. And as you well know, Sam Spiegel had debts, outstanding debts, all the time. The guy lived on credit.
He wouldn't fork up the money for them to shoot this in a real moving taxi cab, which is what should have been done. Instead, Spiegel had delivered an old hulk of a taxi cab.
He couldn't pay the studio, and the studio couldn't have a back projection with people in the street and other cars on the road.
Boris Kaufman, the photographer, came up with this brilliant idea. We'll put blinds in the rear window of the taxi cab, as certain cars had, in the 40s. And to suggest the movement of the taxi cab, we'll have guys shaking the cab from outside, and Kaufman took some sticks and waved them between the lights and the rear of the taxi cab. So you got this kind of strobe-like effect, suggesting the taxi moving through traffic with lights in the background. And while all this shit is going on, Brando is coming up with this genius performance.
Charlie, you should have looked out for me a little bit. You should have taken care of me just a little bit so I wouldn't have to take them dives for the short-end money.
Well, I had some bets down for you. You saw some money.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum.
But the operative point here is that Spiegel wouldn't cough up the money, which, he was right. He didn't need to.
Nevertheless, it's one of the best scenes of the international, of the cosmos of cinema. Brando is magnificent, absolutely magnificent. He touches your soul.
Terry, take this job, please.
Charlie, please take it. Charlie. Oh, Charlie.
Sur les quais est un succès monumental. Il remporte 8 Oscars. L'Oscar du meilleur film, décerné à Sam, confirme qu'il est capable maintenant de produire de grands films.
Ça a quand même été un très très grand courage de la part de Spiegel de produire Le Pont de la rivière Kwai, parce que c'était une sorte de reproduction, mais dans des conditions plus luxueuses, et quand même, il était en meilleure position d'African Queen. Et il a été beaucoup plus présent sur le plateau.
David Lean is probably the best director in the world to combine, to blend the beauty of the background with the impact of the human being in front of that enormous background, without letting the background weigh down on the small human being in front of that enormous background.
Spiegel entre en conflit avec Columbia Pictures, qui refuse de dépenser $250 000 pour construire un vrai pont. Spiegel affirme que sans ce pont, le film perd de sa force. Pour lui, ce $250 000 n'est qu'un chiffre parmi tant d'autres dans le budget du film. Il obtient enfin gain de cause. Dans le roman, le pont n'est pas détruit. Mais dans le film, il a été décidé de le détruire afin d'ajouter de la tension dramatique, jouer sur la confusion qui s'installe au fur et à mesure, et offrir à l'histoire une vraie résolution.
Spiegel has purchased a locomotive and 6 cars once owned by a Maharaja. The ride across the ill-fated bridge will be their last. Cast and crew are tense as the bridge's day of doom arrives. This scene can be shot only once. A single miscue means that almost all of 8 months' work will be wiped out. Spiegel watches a final run-through to clock the arrival of the train. There will be 1 second of leeway for error. Sound equipment is given a final check. Cameras are rolled into position. A battery of 6 of them will be remotely controlled. The company takes cover. In a moment, several hundred tons of steel and timber will rip through the jungle.
Une fois la décision prise de faire sauter le pont, une scène supplémentaire doit être ajoutée au scénario et tournée. Alec Guinness et David Lean cherchent ce qui pourrait amener le personnage de Nicholson, joué par Guinness, à détruire ce pont qu'il était déterminé à sauver. Au final, ce n'est pas clairement montré, et la scène reste sujette à interprétation.
Bridge on the River Kwai was a tremendous success.
Le pont de la rivière Kwai est un succès. Il remporte 7 Oscars. La réputation de Sam en tant que producteur de génie s'affirme encore plus grâce à un 2e Oscar du meilleur film.
I went out exactly the same age he was. In fact, I was, I think, 12 days older. And I lived with the Bedouin for 3 months before the film started.
Peter O'Toole is talking about the legendary T.E. Lawrence, whose remarkable exploits were accomplished in this Arabian desert, the remote location chosen by producer Sam Spiegel to film his epic story. Its shooting color film in the blazing desert required the greatest of planning and patience. The wind and sand were a constant danger to the sensitive color lenses of these massive 70mm Panavision cameras.
Sam really knew how to make films. He actually was very good on budgets and on the whole brought in his films on time because people wouldn't pay for it ever. It took 3 years to make Lawrence of Arabia, and you have to be extraordinarily obsessed and tenacious and believe in what you're doing to do something like that.
Come on, man!
He went to see the King of Jordan to have the streets, the whole army as extras, and he convinced the King of Jordan that he wasn't Jewish. You know, so that's a real tour de force, isn't it?
Even O'Toole, who was pretty irrepressible, was in awe of Spiegel. Comments like, I need 1,000 camels. Oh, said Peter, have you got the money? Well, perhaps 100 will do.
These camels seem to be walking on air above the sand. This is a mirage.
Il lui a fallu un vrai courage physique pour être là, parce que c'était pas du tout son truc. Huston était un aventurier. Lean, il aurait fait n'importe quoi pour tourner son film. Mais Spiegel, c'était un gars qui était bien dans les salons, qui était bien avec la flûte de champagne, les petits fours. C'était un hôte merveilleux pour les soirées, mais c'était pas du tout un homme d'action. Et il a quand même eu un comportement admirable sur les 2 films de Lean. Il a été dans la jungle à Ceylan, il a été dans le désert, et physiquement, il s'est investi. Et ça, je trouve que c'est quand même tout à fait respectable. Aucun autre producteur de son temps n'a fait ça.
Jack Hawkins told me a story of David Lean when they were doing Lawrence of Arabia.
They were constantly at the effect of however Sam was controlling things back at HQ. And they got sick and tired, and then David used to sit and moan. And there was one particular night when they'd finished shooting in time to go out for dinner.
And there were about 30 or 40 people there, and David Lean said to everybody, if anybody mentions Sam Spiegel, they will pay for the whole of the meal, all right? Is that accepted? They all said, yeah.
And so they went out for dinner, and within 5 minutes, David suddenly said, right, I'm paying for the dinner. The trouble with that bastard is...
Après Laurence d'Arabie, il avait obtenu tout ce qu'il voulait. Il n'avait plus rien à prouver, et il a continué à travailler pendant des années, mais il n'avait plus cette sauvagerie et cette intelligence qui lui avait permis d'arriver là. Il voulait prouver qu'il était quelqu'un, qu'il n'était pas juste le pauvre escroc qui a des shérifs et des banquiers derrière lui qui le poursuivent, qu'il était un véritable artiste. Et une fois qu'il a eu ça, qu'il a eu cette reconnaissance, il s'est un peu laissé vivre.
Lawrence d'Arabie remporte 7 Oscars, dont celui du meilleur film. Le 3e pour Sam Spiegel. Il entre dans l'histoire du cinéma en devenant le premier producteur à remporter la statuette 3 fois.
He knew what he was doing up to a point. He got the best people to work for him. Some of his later films, after he won the Oscars, including Nicholas Alexandra, didn't have the same effect.
Après Lawrence d'Arabie, Sam produit La Poursuite impitoyable, La Nuit des Généraux et Les Détraqués. Sam Spiegel se fâche avec David Lean et est exclu de la production du film à succès Le Docteur Zhivago. Il est déterminé à prouver qu'il peut encore produire une grande fresque épique. Son choix se porte alors sur le film Nicolas et Alexandra.
When 2 of the world's foremost movie makers join forces on a film, it becomes a singular event. Producer Sam Spiegel and director Franklin Schaffner are working on a project that demands their kind of imaginative and creative filmmaking. The momentous and poignant events which brought on the Russian Revolution and destroyed the Romanov family of Nicholas and Alexandra.
I got this call, would I please go and see Sam Spiegel at Columbia Studios? And I remember going in, and over there, talking on the phone to somebody quite distant, was a very angry, hunched figure. This hunched figure was clearly, jowls wobbling, angry. And then he banged the phone down and he looked straight in my eyes and he said, that was Lyndon. They won't give me Leningrad. And I suddenly knew I was in the presence of a big-time producer, because if somebody's asking for Leningrad and is speaking to the President of the United States, they've got to be somebody, right?
I realised that the script wasn't very good, and Sam Spiegel I think he'd sacked about 4 or 5 writers. He was good at sacking people. The boy playing my son Alexis had to say, I've got the blood curse. I'm a little bleeder. And I pointed out to Sam that bleeder is like saying you're a prick in American. He said, don't swear in front of Janet. I said, but you can't have this boy saying I'm a little bleeder, because I said in certain countries it'll get roars of laughter, especially in England. And so he got very upset about being corrected, and I wasn't trying to correct him. I was just trying to be helpful. But Sam couldn't see that.
I could have been a Romanov, a Tsar.
It all went wrong. I hardly know why or how.
Instead, I just bleed. It's my fate. I bleed.
He interfered a lot. Franklin Schaffner had just got the Oscar for Patton. Franklin couldn't stand him, because Sam would say, I want to see the girls in their party dresses for the party scene. This was like a week later. And Franklin said, I don't know why, perhaps he's getting off on it or something. They had to stop shooting what Franklin was doing and for the girls to just parade in front of him for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then they'd go back. And I don't know why he did it. He did have a reputation with the ladies. I don't mean on the Weinstein level.
He didn't ask me to unclothe myself. He didn't ask me anything that one had heard Hollywood producers sort of did. That was the age, I suppose. No, he wasn't untoward in any sort of way. He treated me from the outset as a grown-up, not as an object. He sort of adopted me maybe as a kind of daughter figure, I don't know. But the relationship was respectful, which is maybe an unusual side of Sam.
Cures diseases by the laying on of hands. I've seen him do it.
I found her very difficult to get hold of as a character because she was everything that I couldn't admire. First of all, being the Tsarina, she could not see at ground level, and very religious, which is always, with some respect, a suspicious thing to be.
Matushka, I see things. I have power. I cure the sick. Holy men kneel to me and kiss my hands. I am a vessel of the Lord. I have spoken with God.
So I had trouble with it. But I was working with a wonderful Michael Jaston, who was somebody I could understand. We came from the same sort of level.
It didn't do me any good, really, professionally. Quite a lot of people liked it in England, but there were a lot of bad notices when it came out because the script wasn't terribly good, and they weren't incredibly interesting people as such. It was just the things that were going on around them. He was very kind to his family, but he was a terrible Tsar. He was called Bloody Nicholas after all the peasants had been slaughtered. I mean, he's a weak person. I think my favourite scene in Nicholas Alexandra was after he'd resigned and has to go back and tell his wife, and just falls on his knees and says, I'm sorry. And we did it about 5 or 6 times, and it was brilliantly directed by Franklin. And it was one of those few scenes in the picture that I had where the dialogue was very good, and it worked. And it worked with Janet as well. And it must have been a horrifying moment.
I'm sorry. Please, don't. Please. Please, I didn't mean to. Please, I'm so ashamed. I didn't mean to do it. Please, don't. Please, don't. Please.
That was a really good piece of screenwriting. He had nothing to say except to be ashamed of himself. And the shame expressed itself in him falling to his knees in front of the wife.
The night Harold Pinter got married, Sam Spiegel was there at the party, and he said, I want you to do my next film. Which was strange enough, while we were still making French Lieutenant's Woman. And I was overawed because I'm a huge admirer and great friend of Harold Pinter. And I am a great admirer of Sam Spiegel, who I think is probably the greatest living producer there is. And to have the chance to work with him on a Pinter script, it was no problem to say yes.
I think Sam's choice to champion Harold shows that he, in his exquisite taste, could see something fashioned to perfection by Harold's hands, and therefore, like a great work of art, would step back and admire it, and if possible, make sure that other people could admire it too. The film was received in the same way that the play on stage was received, in that it was a means by which you could explore the disintegration of a relationship from the point of it falling apart to the point of its inception and its very beginnings. It's the reversal of destruction. It's the reversal of the destruction of a relationship.
Jerry.
I was best man at your wedding.
My husband's best man. Your best friend's best man.
No. Your best man.
Obviously, the two Hander scenes were probably the memorable ones.
Book good?
Yes.
What is it?
This new book, this man Spinks.
Oh, that. Jerry was telling me about it.
Jerry, was he?
He was telling me about it at lunch last week.
Really?
The scene in the Venice hotel room, of course, because of the sort of Vesuvius that was bubbling up and that eventually gets released.
I was able to walk onto the set and see in my peripheral vision something that the set dresser had put on a shelf near me. It was, in fact, a telephoto lens on a camera. None of that was scripted. None of it was rehearsed. None of it was prepared. That I thought, I wonder if I could look at her in close-up and how disconcerting that would be for her, and how wonderful it would be as a device, not only to use the cameras zooming in, but Robert is zooming into her.
By the way, I went into American Express yesterday.
Oh?
Yes, I went to cash some traveller's checks. You get a much better rate there, you see, than you do in a hotel.
Oh, do you?
Oh, yes. Anyway, there's a letter there for you. They asked me if you were any relation, and I said yes. So they asked me if I wanted to take it. I mean, they gave it to me. But I said no, I would leave it. Did you get it?
Yeah.
It flowed beautifully, and that's because I was on Sam's set. And Sam just said, have confidence in them, let them do their thing. It's a great gift of Sam's, yes, one that's sorely missed.
Jerry wanted us to publish it.
Oh, really?
Well, naturally. Anyway, I turned it down.
Why?
Oh, not much more to say on that subject, really, is there?
What do you consider the subject to be?
Betrayal.
No, it isn't.
That scene is important to the narrative because it's the exposure of the title, it's the exposure of the betrayal. That's the point at which it explodes. It's a very gentle explosion, which is almost more alarming and more heart-stopping.
We're lovers.
Ah, yes, I thought it might be something like that, something along those lines.
It was a very thrilling scene to film.
I've always liked Jerry. To be honest, I've always liked him rather more than I've liked you. Maybe I should have had an affair with him myself.
I loved being on that set, and I loved playing Robert. And the accident of the camera being so close to me in that scene and reaching out for it and holding it up, that was a moment in my cinema journey that is a high point.
You know what you and Emma have in common? You love literature. I mean, you love modern prose literature. I mean, you love the new novel by the new Casey or Spinks. It gives you both a thrill.
The scene in the Italian restaurant where I say you can't get drunk on Corvo Bianco, which is a great line. And I really enjoyed playing it with Jeremy Irons. It was like Wimbledon tennis, bashing the ball back and forward. Wonderful stuff.
You must be pissed. Really? You mean you don't think it gives Emma a thrill?
How do I know? She's your wife.
Yes. Yes, you're quite right. I shouldn't have to consult you. I shouldn't have to consult anyone. But I'm not drunk. You can't get drunk on Corvo Bianco.
Sam had this notion. He was very instinctively clever about marketing a film or the way in which he would put it out. And he wanted this particular cinema, which was an art house in Manhattan. And I remember him saying the story that when On the Waterfront opened, he just opened it. And he said within 24 hours there was a queue around the block, people dying to see it because of the word of mouth. And that's what he wanted for Betrayal, and that's what he got.
Sam, having filmed Betrayal, was very pleased with it, opened the film the day I was nominated for an Academy Award. That is beautiful of Sam to do that. And for me to be in two films side by side, one playing a London publisher and the other playing the father of modern India, could not have been more different, and he had the courage to bypass typecasting, utterly crass, and say, well, he's an actor. He's been with the Royal Shakespeare Company for 15 years. David Jones loves him. I'll put them side by side. Brilliant.
Sam Spiegel s'éteint au terme d'une carrière remarquable. Elle le couronne comme l'un des producteurs les plus innovants et ambitieux de sa génération. Il a été l'initiateur d'un grand nombre de classiques et peut être considéré comme le dernier nabab de l'âge d'or d'Hollywood.
He was much larger than life, he was gargantuan, he was luxurious, and he was a terrible, terrible man, but he was charismatic, and he made great, great movies.
He had a sense of creating the best film you can possibly make.
He came from a tradition of great storytellers, and what we've lost is incalculable, but what we are left with, what remains, are treasures. Those treasures created Hollywood.
There was no boundary that he ever felt was too big for him. He was driven, as you know, all artists have to be, and he was an artist. He was an artist of a producer.
There is no such thing as a completely happy human being. The one happiness I can admit to is that I have, in the last 30 years, never done anything that I didn't want to do. I haven't done movies I didn't want to make. I haven't committed acts I didn't want to commit. I haven't associated myself with causes I didn't have to associate myself with. And as such, I'm probably as happy as a man can be.